Welcome back to the Sully Scoop, where three lifelong Husker bros dive in depth on all surrounding the new era of Husker football, where our cups never run dry of the Rule-Aid under head coach Matt Rule. Made by fans for fans with JSul, BSul, and TSul. This is the Sully Scoop. You're here with JSul and TSul. And let me tell you, college football EA Sports 25 is coming out, and I am pumped up for it, except for a few exceptions. And it has to go down to the rankings for me.
Yeah, I'm ready for it, JSul. I already pre-ordered my game. I'm ready to play it all night the first time it comes out. Got to tell my boss, sorry, man. Look, the game is what it is, and JSul, like you said, they released all their rankings, toughest places to play, top offense, top defense, best teams, and we got some real head scratches out here. I mean, I'm wondering, like, do these people know college football? Have they watched college football this century? Because it doesn't really feel like it. I mean, let's just start with toughest places to play. Like, they ranked Texas A&M number one. Look, I agree. Texas A&M is a hard place to play, but it ain't number one in the country.
Well, what do you think is? Where is the toughest place to play in TSul's mind?
Right now, it's wherever Georgia's playing. That's the toughest place. I don't care. Look, Georgia could be playing in Lincoln, Nebraska. That's the toughest place to play. And it's not because Nebraska's at home, it's because Georgia's there. That's quite simply the toughest place to play. So I also want to know what's coming up with these rankings. Is it tough because the team's good? Is it tough because the atmosphere is good? Is it tough because of what? Like, where do they just pull these numbers out of? Because if it's tough for the atmosphere, then how is Lincoln not on the list? Because, we sell out all these years. We have 90 plus thousand people showing up to these games and we're not on the list. I don't care if the team hasn't been good. The atmosphere is still good.
Yeah, I definitely think the atmosphere in Lincoln, Nebraska has been good. But, these nerds that came out with these games, nerds that come out with these games. I mean, a few of them put this one together. Listen, I don't know where they are, but they are definitely sitting around at ESPN's headquarters because, listen, the top 5 toughest places to play, 4 of them are in the SEC. This is the most SEC biased list I have ever seen in my life. I mean, I have seen the college football playoff come out with their list, and it does not look like this. I mean, these nerds are worse than the college football playoff committee. I agree, Alabama should be up there. LSU may be a tough spot to play, but they're ranked above Ohio State. Ohio State has been the juggernaut of the Big Ten, a juggernaut. Nobody has gone into Ohio State and won consistently. The only team we've really seen do that recently is Michigan, and that's 3 years. You're going to take 3 years, and guess what? They didn't play in Ohio State, in Ohio Stadium for those 3 years in the horseshoe. So I do not agree with this list whatsoever. And another one, Penn State at 6. I think Penn State should be higher, especially when it's a whiteout.
Yeah, Jay, so and you bring up a good point about Ohio State. I mean, is Ohio Stadium really a tough place to play, or is it just because they've got the best athletes in the Big Ten, and so that's a tough place to play? Like, if you inserted our Cornhuskers
I
into
think it's a tough
Ohio,
place to play.
but
I
think
think
about
it's a
it.
tough one.
If you insert Scott Frost Cornhuskers into Ohio, they're not going to magically start winning 11 games. So they're going to be dropping games at home just like they do in Lincoln. And if you gave us the Ohio State Buckeyes from the last couple of years, they're going to be winning every home game. And all of a sudden now Memorial Stadium in Lincoln is ranked as the top 5 toughest place to play. That's what I think. Because when I look at these rankings, except for Texas A&M, because Texas A&M really isn't ever that good, that's how they're running down. Like Alabama, we all know what Alabama is. LSU on the years Alabama's not good is there. Ohio State, Georgia, okay, yeah. Penn State's only lost to Michigan, Ohio State recently. But I'm with you there, Jason. I think in the Big Ten, if I have to pick the toughest place to play, I think I'm putting Penn State number 1 in the Big Ten. That is. I think
And
that's
number
the toughest place.
number 2 for me, honestly, might be Michigan. I think Michigan, they can fill in 120,000 fans. I think that's a great atmosphere to play in. I think, with Michigan the past couple of years and how good they have been, I think it has been one of the toughest places to play. But they're going to go out and put Wisconsin Wisconsin at number 7 in all of college football. Wisconsin is the toughest places to play. I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, jump around all you want. Wisconsin is not the 7 hardest place to play in college football. I don't know if these people have ever watched a college football game before in their lives. Another one that I am surprised and shocked did not make the list. You might find this shocking. Oregon State. Oregon State is
That's
one of
what
the
I was
toughest
thinking.
places to
I was
play
thinking about
in
that.
college football. They have arguably the most upsets against top 25 teams when they go into play at Oregon State.
Well, and JSul too. I mean, look, our Cornhusker faithful are going to hate this. Like, I agree, Memorial Stadium should be up there, but let's be honest, Iowa should be way higher than 20. Iowa is a tough ass place to play because that's a mediocre team and they don't drop very many home games. Period. So they should be a lot higher. And and coming in at 22, you got Michigan State. I mean, is Michigan State a tough place to play? No.
They don't even sell out their stadium. I don't think Michigan State is a tough place to play at all, but I also want to point out another person, or another team, I should say, that I think is kind of shocking. Tennessee. Tennessee has one big game there in 10 years, and they're going to be one of the toughest teams to play, or toughest, stadiums to play in. I don't think so. Again,
Yeah, they
that's
drop
just
a lot of
another
home games.
and that's just another SEC bias there for you. They beat Bama one time at home, and they're the number 13th hardest place to play. Ask Alabama about the previous 30 years they played there.
Well, so Jay, so that's kind of what I want to mention about Tennessee here is Tennessee, aside from the last 3 years, has been where we were as a program. They struggled to make a bowl game. They didn't do any noise since Peyton Manning left. And they weren't a tough place to play. Everyone would go into Tennessee and win. I mean, it's just because it was a bad team. But I put them in our category because the fans still show up for the game. They're loud. They're rowdy. I agree. Tennessee's a tough place to play, but I mean, it seems like they're kind of going back and forth on it. You can't pick and choose. Like, well, that they're tough because they're good, and these guys are tough because the fans show up. But we're gonna do it for these guys, but not those guys. It doesn't make any sense at all. Like
No, it doesn't.
I agree. Oregon is probably worthy of a top 25 place, but again, the 11th toughest place to play in the country. Really? I mean, is this just for this year? Like coming in, is that for this season? Because then, yeah, I would agree. Oregon's going to be a solid football team this year. But if this is all time, I mean, come on. Oregon's got a losing record against everybody that they play. They've only been good the last 15 years, really.
And you want to know a funny one is that you brought up Michigan State. You really think Michigan State is just below Notre Dame in toughest places to play in all of college football? I think Notre Dame should honestly be higher. It's one of the premier college football teams since college football has been around. And, everyone looks forward to going to that stadium, even though I don't like Notre Dame, not one bit at all. It's one of the premier college football stadiums, and they have a great atmosphere at the games, and it really shows when Notre Dame plays at home. And that's why they, not being in a conference kind of helps them out. They have mediocre teams typically come in there that they will beat down. However, there are two teams that I want to point out that I do not think deserve this at all. Virginia Tech. Has Virginia Tech sold out a game in the 21st century? I don't think so. And another one, Boise State, were we just looking around and just looking for Mountain West because we didn't have any Mountain West teams there? Are the people that made this game, the nerds that made this game, are they homers? Was there somebody that made this game from Boise State? I wonder if Boise State has a good, technical services, technical, game making. Clearly, I didn't go into that and major that. But I wonder if they have that type of program there at Boise State, because there is no reason that Boise State should even be on this list, or, even be smelled in the game at this point.
Well, JSul, see, but then that's when you turn and say, well, Boise State doesn't really lose games at home. So it is a tough place to play. But again, what's their quality of teams coming into play? And does that then, because they're beating Idaho at home, does that really make them one of the toughest places in the country to play? And if you say, well, they still never lose, so it's tough, then I get that. But then again, then why are we ranking South Carolina 15? Because South Carolina, quite frankly, doesn't win any games, period. They don't win at home. They don't win on the road. They don't win any games. They get murdered in the SEC. and they're the 15th toughest place to play. Let me tell you something here, JSul. If South Carolina was the 15th toughest place to play, they would eventually come out of the SEC, you would think, right?
I mean, I don't think so. They were just marking them 15 because they already ran out of SEC schools to put in there because they had 4 in the top 5, which is just outrageous. Every SEC team at that point should be, winning every home game. They should be undefeated at home with these rankings they put out here. Also, I'm bringing up Boise State again. I just not a fan of putting a Mountain West team in here for toughest places to play. Send any one of these teams that's on the list into Boise, and they'll knock off Boise State there in Idaho. However, another one I want to bring up about Boise State is if this was about the top 25 coolest places to play, yeah, I'm a fan of the Blue Field. However, the Blue Field doesn't have a stadium wrapping around into a whole dome or a whole bowl to fill up fans. This is a stadium that doesn't even sit that many. It's pitiful that they even put them on this list.
This whole list is pitiful in general because number one, Lincoln, Nebraska is not on there. You're not putting a blue blood on there who's one of the most historic teams, won a bazillion games on the road, at home, championships. You would think that that would be enough that, hey, these guys got a good atmosphere. And if you're not ranking based on that, then some of these other guys shouldn't be on the list either. So it just has me scratching my head. But then I look down to the list, unless JSul, you had anything else to add about any of these other bizarre rankings.
No, I got nothing else for these nerds rankings.
So then let's jump to the EA Sports top offenses in the country. And let's start it out hot. Let's start it out hot for Lincoln Faithful. They came in with Colorado at number 8, the 8th best offense in the country.
Now, listen, this is what I want to get to you. I do think they have a good offense, but it's centered around 2 players. Listen, they have no offensive line. There's no reason that Colorado should be on this list because they don't have an offensive line. They have the top player in college football in Travis Hunter, and they have a good quarterback in Shadir Sanders. Good, not great. The only reason he's getting all these looks is because it's the Dion hype around him. And listen, I was a Dion guy when we got Matt Rule. I said I would rather have Deion Sanders than Matt Rule at the time because he was bringing in top talent. However, it did not show up on the field. Yeah, we know Colorado beat Nebraska last year. Guess what? It's different. Flip the script this year. We got them coming to home into Lincoln, Nebraska. Colorado is a team that is going to be ranked high in EA Sports college football, and all the ESPN analysts are always going to be talking about them because that's the Dion hype around them. But when the rankings come out for the 2024 college football season, Colorado will not be a top 25 team in offense. They won't even be a top 40 team in offense. Colorado does not deserve to be on this list. All it is Dion hype here.
Yeah, I mean, well put there, JSul. The Colorado being, I could see them coming in the top 25. I could see you just placing them at 24, 25 because you're like, the offense has potential, not necessarily the team, but the offense does. Number 8 in the country. I mean, that's just disrespectful to everybody you put below them. Because, I mean, you run down this list. You have Ole Miss at number 13. I'm sorry, but Ole Miss is probably going to be one of the best teams in the country this year. There's no way that they're going to be ranked below Colorado. There's no way. Penn State. I mean, Penn State's offense has been firing on all cylinders for like 4 or 5 years now. And you're telling me you're going to rank them below Colorado, who won 4 games? And look, I get you could say that's not on the offense, but guess what? The offensive line is still part of the offense. The lack of a running game is still part of the offense. It is.
I mean, some of these teams, again, we're bringing in mediocre non-power 5 conference teams into this. But one I do want to bring up is USC ranked at 25, I think is a little outrageous as an offense. I mean, they had a backup quarterback, go into the bowl game and set a record for touchdown passes in a bowl game. I mean, I do think it shows that Caleb Williams is going to be a bust in the NFL, as somebody else went in there and did the same stuff. I think it is all centered around the offense that they have out there, and I don't think that they got fairly ranked here as an 83 overall. I think they have a top 10 offense in USC.
Yeah, I think USC got screwed. I think Oklahoma coming in at 23 got screwed over. And quite frankly, I don't see a place for Memphis, SMU, and UCF to come in at 19, 20, and 21. I don't see the rankings of those offenses. Florida State at 22, they probably should be higher too, based on what they did last season.
Yeah, and guess what? If they still had their quarterback out there, would they be the number one? That's a big question for you, T. So if they still had their quarterback, Jordan Travis, out there in Florida State, would they be the number one overall offense in this game?
No, definitely not, Jay. So I mean, there's no way you're putting them in front of Georgia or Oregon. Their top
Well,
two, I think they got their top two correct.
we're talking about a quarterback that held him out of being in the college football playoff just because he was hurt. I mean, he was the difference in being a playoff team and a non-playoff team.
They did him
That
a favor.
I don't know.
They did him a favor there, Jay. So
Uh,
it would have been murder's row out there.
CT, so I kind of disagree. I think once a lot of the guys opted out of the game, they were still going against Georgia, and obviously Georgia is the best team in college football and Georgia deserved to be in the college football playoff last year. I think that is a two-peat that they just had, undefeated until the end of the year. They lose the SEC championship. They should have been in. And I think that's where, as soon as guys started opting out for Florida State, they were completely outmatched. Now, I'm not saying they would have beat Georgia handily. I'm not saying it, but I'm saying it would have been a game.
Yeah. And JSul, the other question mark I have right now is, are they serious in thinking that the Kansas Jayhawks are the 14th best offense in the country? Let me say that again. The Kansas Jayhawks as the 14th best team in the country for offense. Hell no. That's what I got to say to that. Hell no. Kansas is not that type of program. They're not going to do that. I mean, we watched them fall apart. We watched them win a bunch of games early and fall apart.
Well, once you see that they got a 4-8 squad ranked at 8, I mean, anything is possible. They got a team in Clemson who has fallen off. Fallen off. Cade Klubnik is not the answer out there in Clemson. They went out, they got no transfers. Clemson is in the dumps and they are down. Dabo is going to be fired this year. I'm saying it here first there, TSul. Call it a hot take, call it whatever you want.
Dabo Swinney is getting fired.
Dabo Swinney, if he does not make a bowl game, will be fired.
Wow. Wow, JSul. B-Soul is not even going to believe that you just came out here and said that. You think they're going to fire him after the season, middle of the season? I mean, what at this point?
Dabo Swinney, if he does not go bowling this year, you know what? Scratch that. Dabo Swinney, if he does not make the playoff, remember there's 12 teams this year and is not in the top 4 in the ACC at the end of the year, he will be fired.
So if he came in at number 5, they're firing him. They're not even letting him play the playoff game.
Number 5 and doesn't make the college football playoff. Which, if you're number 5 in the ACC, you're not making the college football playoff. If you're number 3 in the ACC, you're not making the college football playoff.
I thought you meant number 5 in the country. I was like, if he's number 5 in the country, he's making the playoff.
No.
And if you're showing him the door, then someone else needs to get shown the door.
Nope. I think he's put all his eggs in a basket in Cade Klubnik, and I think it's going to really, trip on his feet over there in Clemson. They were ready for him to go last year. They're going to be really ready for him to go. I believe his saying was they stopped appreciating excellence and start expecting excellence.
Well, I mean, when you're bringing in top 5 classes consistently, what else are you going to expect? I'm not expecting a top 5 recruiting class for the last 4 years to come in and lose 6 games. Quite frankly, if you're saying that that's not part of the expectation, then yeah, you got to start looking at your coaching at that point. But JSul, I'm not going to sit here and say that Dabo's going to get fired. I think Dabo's going to, hit the fountain of youth at some point and make another run because good old Nick Saban's gone. And he knows that top spot is up for grabs.
It's really not because Georgia's there. Georgia is the top dog. Listen, Alabama is not
Georgia
going to
hit lightning in a bottle, JSul? Are they done? Is Georgia
for 3 years
falling down the mountain?
For 3 years, you think, and then Georgia is going to be falling down the mountain.
They missed the playoff last
Dylan
year.
Raiola didn't go to Georgia
because if you don't make the playoff, what's the point of playing?
They should have made the
where
playoff. They only
Georgia
lost
is.
one game. They lost one game in what, 2 to 3 years because they had a two-peat already. Georgia
Cost them.
deserved to be in the college football playoff last year.
They
Georgia
did.
is the top dog. There's a reason Dylan Raiola, the 5-star, going to
But you
Lincoln,
sat here and
Nebraska,
argued
in
for
Lincoln,
Florida
Nebraska
State
already.
to replace Georgia. You sat here and said Georgia shouldn't go, Texas shouldn't go. It should be Florida State. That's what
No,
you
I
said,
said
JSul.
Georgia and Florida State should go. Alabama lost to Texas. Therefore, Texas should be over Alabama. And I think Florida State should have been over Texas because they were undefeated. Texas was not. Texas lost at home.
JSul's
There we go. And we're
panicking.
moving on from that. We're moving on from that. I thought it should have been Michigan, Florida State, Georgia, Oregon. Not in that. Sorry, Washington.
I
Not
was
in that
gonna
order.
say,
Not in that order. Not in that order. If I would have came out with Oregon, you know what? Turn me, you know what? This, I'm unlegible at that point. However, I do want to go back to this list. Oregon has the number one offense in college football, not Georgia. Georgia has the best all-around team. Oregon has the best offense. And I think that's how it really should have been ranked in this game. But you're going to come out here and tell me that Georgia is not the top dog. That's another thing I want to get back to. Alabama is going to have a sleeper of a year. They're not making the playoff. Take
well,
that as my
JSul,
number 2 hot take.
well, hold on a sec. So now you're saying Bama doesn't have a chance for the playoff. You forgot that 12 teams get in. And yeah,
Oh, I remember the 12 teams get in.
I get the fact that they got a new coach and everything, but they're still Bama at this point. They could easily slide in number 12.
I do not think so. You got Texas on their heels. You got Georgia there. I think LSU has a chance, except for LSU. They need a new quarterback out there. That's the one thing. And then Ole Miss is right there. Ole Miss is getting all the players. Listen, they're rolling up to games in Lambos. I mean, Ole Miss has the dogs now. I mean, they are coming to play. Ole Miss might be the number 2 team in the SEC this year behind Georgia.
JSul, I think Ole Miss might be ready to unseat Georgia as the top dog in the SEC. I'm just saying, I'm not sitting here booking my ticket because it's still Georgia. They're still the Bulldogs. You know, they're still the top dog, but Ole Miss is there.
I totally agree.
Is their time. And so if you tell me at the end of the season they unseat Georgia and went undefeated and took that number 1 seed or number 2 seed, depending on how things play out, I'd believe it. I'd totally believe it. If you told me Georgia beat Ole Miss and Georgia was the 1 seed and Ole Miss was the 5 or 6, I'd also believe that too. They're the number 1 or the number 2. I mean, you got the SEC's already figured out. It's Georgia, Ole Miss. Those are your top 2. Oklahoma's not making any waves. Don't worry about that. LSU's not going to do anything. Bama probably isn't going to take the SEC. They might do enough to get in because they still got Saban's recruits. But
Nah,
again,
they're all leaving
all
there,
new coaching,
JSul.
all everything. I'm not sitting here saying they're going to top Georgia and Ole Miss, who've been on the rise. And Texas could make waves, but I don't think they're going to make enough waves to get out of the SEC unscathed. I see Texas making the playoff, but I think at that point they're like an 8 or 9 seed at best.
I think Texas makes the playoff. And listen, Texas was a great team last year and made the playoff. I don't think they should have made the playoff, but they did. It's going to be a big difference when you're going against a Bama caliber, which they beat last year on the road, but you're going into that week in, week out. It's a difference from the Big 12. I think I think Texas is going to be the 3rd best team in the SEC, but I think it's Georgia, Ole Miss, then Texas, and I think there is a drop off after that. Not a big one because we're going to have the SEC bias rolling in, and the SEC is going to get 4 teams in. But I can tell you this right now, TSul, it ain't Bama.
Then it's LSU probably. I mean, that's where you're sticking. I don't see Mississippi State doing much. I don't see Arkansas doing anything. South Carolina, hell no. Tennessee, probably not. I mean, Tennessee had their day in the sun when they beat Bama at home, tore down the goalpost and threw it in the river. It's all Tennessee's going to do. They're done. So, you jump to the Big Ten teams you expect in the playoffs. You look at it, you expect Oregon in the playoff. You expect Ohio State in the playoff. Who else? I mean, JSul, who else do you expect in the playoff at the Big Ten? Penn State, probably, right? I mean, you're saying you're going to get 4 SECs in and 4 Big Tens. Who's that 4th Big Ten team for you?
I do think that Penn State could be that team. However, if
Well,
Penn
Penn
State
State's a
drops a
third
game,
team.
if Penn State drops another game that they don't typically do, that's where they'll lose it. Because now we're adding more teams that Penn State's going to have to play this year, right? Yeah. So Penn State isn't just going to have to go against Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, and drop 2 out of 3. This is going to be a different year. Penn State's always on the door, knocking at the end of the season, top 12, top 15. So I do think they could squeak their way in, especially if you got two Big 12 teams ahead of them. They're only taking one Big 12 team. This is the power conference of the world. It's a power two. 4 teams from the Big Ten are in it. And I think if you're in the top 15 and you're in the Big Ten, you're in. If you're in the top 15 and you're in the SEC, you're in.
Yeah, and see the problem for Penn State, and I'm gonna put the same problem on Iowa, is they both have a realistically easy schedule. And so if they come out of the Big Ten play with one loss, that should be enough to boost them to the Big Ten championship. And if you end up going against an Ohio State or an Oregon or a Michigan, or for Iowa's case, if they play the Penn State and they just get mollywopped, that's it. You probably don't recover enough from that to get in the playoff, and that number 5th team from the Big Ten probably scoots in front of you at that point.
I disagree there for you there, TSul. I think
So you think if Iowa
whoever makes
goes,
whoever makes the
if
Big
you
Ten
think if
championship is in.
Iowa goes to the Big
Win,
Ten championship and gets mollywopped by Penn State, they're still going to the playoff.
win
I
or
want to
lose,
hear
you're
you
in.
say this on record here, JSul.
Win or lose the Big Ten championship, if you're in the championship, you are in the playoff. I
So,
mean, we're
Scoopers, you heard it here. JSul is
do
fully
you not know how
expecting
do you
Iowa
not know
into
how
the
they're picking
playoff.
teams this year? Do you not know
You,
how they're picking teams this year? It's the best 2 teams in the Big Ten go to the Big Ten championship. I mean, are you stupid? The best 2 teams are going to the playoff.
Scoopers, JSul is betting his life savings on Iowa going to the college football playoff. You heard it
No.
here
First of
first.
all, you said Iowa would be in the Big Ten championship. So are you betting on Iowa being in the Big Ten championship? Are you locking that in right now?
That's a better lock than locking them into the college football
No, that is
playoff.
not what I said. That is not what I said. Everyone could rewind this. Beep, beep, beep. 5 minutes. That's all you got to do. Not even 30 seconds. I said the top 2 teams in the Big Ten, which would be in the Big Ten championship game, both teams will be in the college football playoff no matter what happens in that game.
Even if they got mollywopped. So you're
I don't
saying
care. I don't care who
Iowa
it is or what
gets
happens.
beat 50-0, like they did
Why
in
do
a
you
bowl
keep
game
putting
against
Iowa
Penn
in the
State
Big Ten championship?
and
Why do you
Tennessee.
keep putting Iowa in the Big Ten championship? Are you
Because
locking
I want to
Iowa
hear you say that you still trust this foolproof plan, even if it's Iowa. It's not Ohio State who got blown out, and everyone's like, yeah, there's still Ohio State. It was an off day. We're talking now, it's Iowa, who has proved nothing ever. So I want to hear you say that if Iowa somehow scooted into the Big Ten championship game because they won a tiebreaker with 2 losses or 1 loss, and they get absolutely annihilated, you'd still put them in the college football playoff.
I'm putting the top 2 teams in the Big Ten in the college football playoff, no matter what happens in that championship game,
So
and no
you
matter
think
who
that
is
they're
playing.
still a top 2 team, even though they got annihilated?
If they're playing in the Big Ten championship game, yes.
But what about somebody who had a way tougher schedule, and because they had a tougher schedule, they dropped the game, but Iowa never played a team of those caliber the entire season?
Go ahead and lock in Iowa as a Big Ten champ for you already. I mean, you just keep calling them out here. I mean,
I'm not picking them as a Big Ten champ, but I'm just saying that their schedule points to the fact that they could be in the Big Ten championship.
The Big Ten championship matchup will both teams of that will be in the college football playoff. That is a fact, Jack.
What if your college football? What if your Big Ten championship game is Indiana against Illinois? Are you still locking it in that they're both making the college football playoff?
Absolutely, because they would be the best 2 teams in the Big Ten at that point.
But at that point, then the Big Ten has to be just a dumpster fire. At that point, I would look at the Big Ten and say, there's no good teams. Any Big Ten team is going to get annihilated come playoff time.
If those teams were to make the Big Ten championship game, they would either have 0 losses, 1 loss, or possibly 2 losses. There's a possibility, but I think you got to have 1 or no losses to make the Big Ten championship game.
But let's say Indiana comes in with 3 losses, and
they're not making the championship in the Big Ten with 3 losses.
Let's just say the
it's
tiebreakers
impossible.
worked it out that way. The tiebreakers worked it out that way.
So
Indiana
every
somehow
team in the
makes
Big
it.
Ten has 3 losses.
Yeah, well, no, because they could be playing somebody who's undefeated. Say they're playing Michigan, who's undefeated. Indiana
Okay, and
comes in
everyone
with
else
three
has
losses.
3 losses. Everyone else
Yeah.
has 3 losses.
And Indiana's
And you're
the team
telling
who
me
scoots in there and gets
and they scoot
destroyed
in there.
by Michigan.
They scoot in there over
You're putting
Ohio
them in the
State
playoffs
and
still.
Oregon. They scoot in over Ohio State and Oregon. That means they would have
Yeah.
had to beat at least one
Let's
of them,
say it's
if not both. At least
five-team
one of them, if
tiebreaker.
not both. Yes.
Let's say it's a 5-team tiebreaker, and Indiana's the one to scoot in there, and they get destroyed by Michigan.
The statistic probability on that is below.
But you're telling me it's 100% guaranteed, and I'm coming up with a scenario that is showing you that it's not 100% guaranteed.
Listen,
that if you make the championship, you're going to the playoff.
If your bookie lets you pick it right now, both Big Ten championship matchup teams to make the college football playoff, you take that. You put your house on it. I'll let you put my house on it. Put everything you got on it. Listen, both teams in the Big Ten championship game, no matter what happens in the game, will be in the college football playoff. I would not be surprised if it's a tune-up game for them now, and you see guys sitting out of that. And that is only because it is a 12-team playoff now. And I'm sorry, but it's a big 2 in this world that we're living in. And it's going to be 4 SEC, 4 Big Ten, fill in the rest with whoever.
And JSul,
they're really, the only thing they're playing for in that game is the host. That's really it. You're either getting a bye or you're hosting. There's no difference.
And JSul, when Indiana gets embarrassed in the Big Ten championship game, you're going to have a knock on your door, a bunch of people with torches and pitchforks ready to run you out of town because you just told them to bet their house on it, and they followed you right off the cliff with that.
So do you have Indiana or do you have Iowa in the Big Ten championship? Or are they playing each other there, TSul?
You already know my Big Ten championship matchup. I got Penn State playing Iowa. And I'm telling you this right now, if Iowa loses the Big Ten championship, they are not guaranteed to make the playoff.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Both teams in the Big Ten
not.
championship will be in the college football playoff.
There, JSul. Iowa does not have a good strength of schedule. Just like the Cornhuskers do not have a good strength of schedule.
Doesn't matter at this point. Do you want to have a little wager on this one, TSul?
I'm not willing to bet on Iowa. Don't even lock that in.
I'm not even putting Iowa in there.
Then you're locking in USC. Are you locking in USC? I want to hear you lock in USC.
I'm locking in both Big Ten championship teams make the playoff. I don't care who they are. They could be Rutgers for all I care. They could be Maryland. They could be Washington with nobody anymore. It could be UCLA without a coach. I don't care who is in the Big Ten championship game. It could be Minnesota with PJ Fleck, who was supposed to be fired last year, according to you. It could be Northwestern. It could be Illinois. It could be Indiana. It could be Purdue.
Tell you what, JSul, I'll take this little wager of yours. If you take a little wager that Purdue is going to win the Big Ten outright this season.
That makes 0 sense.
Take the bet. I'll take your bet.
No, that has nothing to do with anything. You see how we get lost off the rails, folks? It's just TSul just coming up with something just random. So let's flip it back and talk about the top 10 defenses since you're coming up with random wagers there, TSul. Is there anything you saw that came off shocking to you about the top 25 defenses in EA Sports college football?
25. Easy one there for you, JSul. Coming in at number 20, Colorado. How the hell is Colorado a top 25 offense and a top 25 defense, and yet they're only winning 4 games? At this point, then, you better fire your entire coaching staff. If you're telling me you have one of the best defenses in the country, one of the best offenses in the country, and you can't win more than 4 games, that says a lot about your coaching. And I can tell you, based on that defense and their rankings last season, there's no way in hell they're going to snip anywhere near 20. They're going to be closest to the 20th worst defense in the country instead of 20th best defense in the country.
Yeah, that's one I definitely couldn't get behind. But I want to start it off with the number 2 team overall. How is Georgia number 2? Georgia should be number 1. Georgia has been the best defense in college football for the past 3 years. How are they not number 1? If anything, rank Georgia 100 overall, a 99 overall. They are the best defense. They are arguably the best team in college football still, but they are for surely the best defense.
Yeah, and I mean the only team who really rivaled them recently was Michigan. So the fact that Michigan's coming in at number 7 is kind of disrespect to the recent champs. And hey, I'm putting little quotations and asterisks next to this championship too, but that defense was still stellar.
Yes, absolutely. They did know everyone else's plays, which I did hear. If you play as Michigan, you automatically get to see what the other team's play is. Whatever they choose, you see. You get to show where their guys are going to be running their pass routes. That's just a word on the street.
Yeah, and JSul, if that were the truth, I would play only with Michigan because it would be easy pickings at that point. But I mean, I'm looking at these rankings still. I mean, you come in with Clemson at number 5. I'm sorry, but Clemson hasn't been number 5 in like 6 years at this point. You got Notre Dame at number 6. The last time Notre Dame was anywhere worthy of number 6, they had Manti Te'o with his fake girlfriend on that defense. So again, Notre Dame is not number 6 defense in the country. They should be top 25, but they ain't top 10. I'm sorry to tell you. I mean, Notre Dame, they don't play anybody. Like if they're playing Georgia and they're beating Georgia and competing with Georgia, then that's a different story. But they are not doing that. They're not doing. They teamed up with the ACC. They got, they got a patty cake schedule. That's when Clemson was a top 3 defense in the country because they had their patty cake schedule of the ACC.
Yeah, and I don't know how you can have an Oregon who gave up what 60 something points as number 3 in the country. They gave up what 60 in 2 games they played Washington. They got to play Washington twice and they gave up what 60 points. Yeah, there's no reason they should even be on this list for defense. And therefore, nobody else in what was or what still is the Pac-12 should be on this list. I'm talking Utah. I'm talking Oregon. I'm talking USC, who had arguably one of the worst defenses in the college football last year. I'm talking Colorado. The list goes on of terrible defenses. There's nobody in the Big 12 that should be on this list. Nobody that was in the Big 12, nobody that was in the Pac 12. I mean, the list goes on. This is outrageous, and I don't really know how they put together this list.
Well, Jay saw I didn't quite catch everything you just said. I know you ran through a bunch of teams and a bunch of teams where I was thinking to myself, that's a mediocre defense or that's a terrible defense. And for some reason, we're ranking them in the top 25 before the season starts for the video game. And that's just ridiculous. I mean, you're just building up some of these teams' fan bases for expectations that are never going to happen. Because, I mean, let's face it, number 16 for USC. USC is not one of the best defenses in the country. These guys give up 50 points a game plus. So I'm expecting them to get murdered in the Big Ten. I mean, you're gonna see some of the worst Big Ten offenses we've ever seen, like Iowa dropping 30 points on USC. And yeah, that's a big deal for Iowa. If you recall, they win every game in single digits without scoring any touchdowns. Oklahoma, again, they're not a defensive powerhouse, and we're coming in ranking them at number 12 is ridiculous. And who should be number 12 is Nebraska, because Nebraska last season was top 15 defense in the country. I think we came in at number 12 overall defense, and we're nowhere to be found on the top 25. And instead, they drop in Colorado, they drop in Oklahoma, they drop in Wisconsin, who was another dumpster fire. And the fact that Iowa is number 13, Iowa was the best defense in the country last year. So, what are you trying to say? I mean, they won every game with their freaking punter and their defensive interceptions. They didn't do anything for offense. So, I don't get it. I really don't get it. I mean, you're saying Georgia could be number 1. I agree. I get that. I agree with that. But Iowa is a close number 2, if not tied at number 100 overall, because Iowa's got nothing else going for them.
I do agree with that. Iowa won too many games at 3-0, and they scored a field goal because their defense slash special teams was able to punt return a ball into field goal range, or they intercepted the ball and was able to take it into the field goal range and get a field goal, and that was the game. Iowa's defense is definitely top two. I think Georgia, just being in the SEC and being Georgia, the past few years, I could get why they should be number one, and that's why I believe they should be number one. But Iowa is definitely a top two defense in the country. There's no reason Ohio State is number one. And talking about USC, I think they forgot an extra one in their ranking because USC last year in all of college football was ranked 116th. 116th, not 16th, 116th. So this is outrageous that they're going to come out here and rank them number 60. And another one, Colorado was ranked 127th last year, 127th in all of college football. And I believe there's only 132 teams in college football.
So yeah, once again, like any team that's coming from the Pac-12, they're not known for defense. They don't have defenses, and their defenses are going to struggle in the Big Ten because guess what the Big Ten teams do? They run it down your throat. They short yard you to death. I mean, imagine thinking that USC has a top 20 defense in the country, number 16, and they play Minnesota and give up 40 points to Minnesota, and they only score 20 because Minnesota short yarded you to frickin' death the entire game. Your defense is just exhausted, out of breath, and they're just getting bodied and bodied and bodied the entire game. That's what's going to happen to USC. So if you think they're going to be top 25, you're smoking something, and you quite frankly should share with the class because you're smoking something real good at that point.
Again, I believe that nerds came out with this list, nerds made the game, and nerds don't know or never have watched college football for that matter.
But then, JSul, we jump to what we've been waiting for, and that is the EA Sports College Football Top 25 Power Rankings. So not defense, not special teams. This is who they think the best teams in the country are. And lo and behold, if you didn't guess it, the teams that they put as top offense, top defense in the country, they're going to slot in there as top teams in the country. And so should we be shocked that they're trying to put Colorado at number 16 again? I mean, at this point, I feel like I'm just the little boy crying wolf. Like, freaking let it go. They're not a top 16 team in the country.
Yeah, and I believe, last year if they would have been able to hold on to the lightning in the bottle that they got at the beginning of the year. Too bad they faced a TCU who lost everyone, and they beat them, who TCU was ranked. Then they went on a little spurt. Colorado finished the year with 4 wins. 4 wins. And they're ranked number 16. This is just outrageous. I really don't know what Colorado games they have watched. I mean, are they looking up just Deion Sanders highlights for back when, Deion Sanders played football? This is outrageous. Colorado should not even be in the top 25. They should not be in the top 50 for that matter, if the list even went that far. I do have to say I agree with the top 5 for that matter. Oh, Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, Alabama, Texas. I can get behind that. Those teams have been there in college football. They were there at the end of the year last year, up at the top. I agree that, Washington isn't there in the top 5. I agree that Michigan isn't there. Those teams have lost, quite a amount of people, quite a amount of
But
players.
what about your buddy Dabo? They slotted Clemson in at number 6.
That is one I can't get behind because Dabo, we saw what he did last year. Nothing has changed on this program. Nothing has changed on this team. He no longer has the best quarterback in college football, and he shows what he did when he lost Trevor Lawrence.
And JSul, another crazy thing is what they're trying to do with the ACC at this point. I mean, they're trying to push up the ACC is what it seems like, because you got Clemson at 6, Notre Dame, who's technically ACC, you got them at 7, you got Florida State at 12, you got Miami at 13, Miami, who hasn't done anything since this century period. You got NC State at 21, and as shocking as it is, I don't see North Carolina anywhere on this list.
Yeah, ACC biased. I could definitely see that. I mean, it almost feels like they felt bad for leaving Florida State out last year, and ESPN said, give them the college football, EA Sports, because Virginia Tech, Virginia Tech, we're really bringing Virginia Tech and talking football about Virginia Tech. NC State is again another team that made the list. The ACC is all over this list, and I just can't get behind it. Miami, don't see why. Florida State, apparently they're not good enough to make the college football playoff without their quarterback. They don't have their quarterback anymore. Why should they be ranked number 12 in this game?
Yeah, and again, why is Wisconsin coming in at number 18? I mean, didn't Wisconsin barely squeak out 6 wins last year? So I don't see how they're jumping up like Colorado to be number 18 in the country. I mean, Wisconsin, quite frankly, has been on the path that they just seem to get worse every year, and they haven't quite found themselves since Bielema left, and I don't see them finding themselves this year. Uh, they had one of the best running backs in the conference last year and couldn't do anything with them. So I don't know how you're magically just going to become an amazing team. You're not, is what I'm getting at. You don't have a 5-star quarterback coming into play for you like we do. So Wisconsin can suck it at that point.
And I do want to say, going over the SEC list here in the top 15, we're talking 6 teams in the top 15, which I get. I get it's the SEC, whatever, you're going to have a bias. Ole Miss is the sixth best SEC team. You're talking Texas A&M lost their coach. Texas A&M has a new AD. Texas A&M is trash. Listen, there's a reason they lost their coach. LSU just lost the Heisman Trophy winner they had last year that got them to 9-3. I don't believe they are better than Ole Miss at this point. I don't believe that Alabama, who has a new coach, new program, new coordinators everywhere, they have a new system going in there, and they lost a bunch of players. I think that Ole Miss should at least, they're at 15, should at least have been in the top 10, but I would have just, put them at 8, put them at 7. Notre Dame is kind of outrageous. They don't play anybody, but if you're going to want to put in, blue bloods that are a part of college football for years to come or years prior, I get it, but then you're missing some other teams that really should have been up there.
And and JSul, you don't even bring up the worst part about where they ranked Ole Miss. It's the fact that they think they're just 1 point better than Colorado. Are you guys serious? You did you did you even pay attention to what Ole Miss was doing? I mean, dude, they were making moves last year. They were a real good football team, and they probably had a good enough team to win the SEC, but they didn't do it. So the expectation has to be there for them to make a move like that.
Absolutely. And you want to know something? You bring up one better than Colorado. How about 7 better than Kansas? I mean, these are 2 atrocious teams. Yeah, they're going to be in the Big 12 this year. Yeah, the Big 12 is atrocious. I mean, these are their top teams coming out of the Big 12, uh, other than Utah. But why are these 2 teams ranked? We're talking Colorado, who was 4-8. I just still can't get that out of my mind. 4-8, and they're ranking them at 16, and then 87 overall. 87 gets you 4 wins.
Jason, I think that they just went for like the shock value. They just wanted people talking about the game. They wanted people ripping on the game. So they're like, let's just inflate Colorado stuff, and that'll be the best marketing you can do because quite frankly it worked. We can't stop talking about how they atrociously ranked Colorado and everything that they did.
Absolutely. So I guess when people are going into this game and playing the EA Sports College Football 25, do you believe that, there might be a GM out there in the NFL that goes and plays as Colorado and gets to use Shadir Sanders and ends up drafting him in the first round because he has had inflated stats that bring this team to an 87 overall?
Jason, I don't want to say it's out of the realm for him to be a first round pick, but I can tell you this: he's definitely not going to be the first overall pick. And the Colorado fans seem to think that he's guaranteed to be the first overall pick. And I can tell you right now, he's not good enough to be number 1 overall. There's too many distractions involved. Uh, he hasn't proven himself to be the guy. So I don't see him being the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft.
Well, neither do I, TSul, and I think it's really going to show in week 2 when Colorado comes to Lincoln. And maybe they'll be updating their stats throughout the season or updating their rankings throughout the season to keep them more live as the season goes on, hopefully. And, update the player stats as it goes. But thanks for joining us for another episode of the Sully Scoop. You're here with JSul and TSul.
Thanks for coming on.
And don't forget to follow and like, and you can catch us at Sully_Scoop on X, formerly Twitter. And you can also catch us at thesullyscoop.com. That's www.thesullyscoop.com.
Go Big Red.